The combination of the strength of the Nightmare Mode level 40 Barbarian, Whirlwind, and the power of the runes created by Bull Kathos children was almost invincible. It was almost beyond the realm of a technique and almost grasped onto the laws of nature. Out of the 4 people who had the sword on top of their heads, Farrington was facing the most pressure. Although the semi-god tier combat weapon was powerful, any other energy that landed on it would be sent into his body. Therefore, he experienced the full power of the whirlwind. Blood gushed out of Farrington's mouth and nose, and sand of earthly anger also lost its glare and returned to Farrington's palm like a regular big sand grain. Snow Mountain Hermit used Farrington as a medium to control the sand of earthly anger, and he was lightly injured. However, all of his warrior energy was sucked away by this semi-god tier combat weapon. His legs were weak, and he had no way of defending himself now. If that silver sword fell, he would be killed for sure. MODOK and Tony were not involved in the battle and weren't injured that much, but their faces paled. Chilling sensation coming from the swords above them numbed their bodies. "I lost." As he sensed the chilling energy on the swords above his head, a bitter smile appeared on Farrington's face, and he said, "I lost again. If you focused on cultivation and is a moon-class elite, this situation would be different since you would be able to get more power out of the sand of earthly anger," Faye said. Although he and Farrington were on different sides, he did appreciate this young man. After all, he was able to see some of the noble and honorable traits in this young man. Whoosh! The silver sword on top of Farrington's head disappeared, and Farrington was at a loss of words. It wasn't the first time that someone told him that he was too weak in terms of cultivation. The consecutive loses made him re-examine his chosen path. Faye stopped talking and looked to the other 3. After a while of silence, "Kill me?" After seeing Faye's stares, Snow Mountain Hermit said as his straight body curled a little. Faye's powerful uprise made him feel powerless. Geniuses were known as geniuses because they could fight with enemies who were a lot older and a lot more experienced. Although Snow Mountain Hermit had been cultivating a lot longer than Faye, he couldn't do anything now. "Good." Faye sneered and didn't show any mercy. This man in red forced Angela and Elena to lose consciousness, and Faye had been wanting to kill him. Since he got the opportunity today, he wasn't going to let it go. "Wait! No!" Farrington and MODOK both shouted as they tried rush to Snow Mountain Hermit and wanted to block the sword for him. As they did that, they begged Faye for mercy. They were both from the Jax Empire, and they had been learning from Snow Mountain Hermit for more than 10 years. They had a deep bond with their master, and they couldn't let him just die in front of them. On the other hand, Tony, who was favored by Snow Mountain Hermit, was so scared that he didn't say or do anything. After seeing that Faye was looking at him, he kneeled and begged out of fear, "Don't kill me. Please don't kill me. If you want to kill someone, kill him." Tony screamed as he pointed at Snow Mountain Hermit. "It was him who told me to attack you. It is all his fault." "You? Tony, how can you say that? What you are doing is unethical and wrong. Senior brother Tony, do you know what you are talking about? Everyone in Big Snow Mountain knows that our master loves you the most. He even used almost all of Big Snow Mountain's treasures to push you into the realm of Moon Class. How can you treat your own master like this?" MODOK and Farrington shouted at Tony. They were so furious that they could eat him alive. They felt terrible for their master as Snow Mountain Hermit's love and investment yielded such a terrible outcome. It was almost unbearable, just like what they thought. Snow Mountain Hermit couldn't believe his ears. His body was already curled a little due to the loss in battle, and it bent even more after hearing what Tony had said. After a while, he slowly closed his eyes and sighed. Unexpectedly, he didn't get mad. He was just sad and disappointed. Felt like he had aged a lot in just those few seconds. "This is impossible. Move. You guys aren't qualified to ask me to go easy on them." Farrington, "Don't think that I won't kill you." Faye wasn't moved by the situation at all. With a cold expression, he waved his hand, and the silver sword shivered a little. The powerful energy pushed down and forced Farrington and MODOK away, and it continued to chop down at Snow Mountain Hermit. The king already made up his mind. Just as Snow Mountain Hermit was about to die under Faye's sword energy, something happened. A dash of orange sword energy shot towards this direction from the elemental altar, and it collided with Faye's silver sword energy. After a series of sparks and metal colliding noises, the two swords shivered in midair and exploded into mists before disappearing. King Alexander of Chambord, please wait. I owed this Snow Mountain Hermit a favor, and I couldn't just watch this happen on the side. How about you let him go this time? That master of Jax, who was short but majestic, spoke loudly as he stood by the portal on the west side of the altar. Everyone was surprised. No one anticipated that this silent and powerful master of Jax would suddenly step in and save Snow Mountain Hermit. Faye frowned a little. However, the king already thought of this. Since Farrington was from the royal family of Jax and suddenly got the semi-god tier weapon, Sand of Earthly Anger, it meant that top-tier masters from Jax were here to help. It was clear that the man standing on the altar was a member of Jax. So Faye knew that he was going to step in sooner or later. Whoosh! That master of Jax waved his hand, and an orange light shone brightly. The Sand of Earthly Anger that died down in Farrington's hand suddenly lit up, and it dashed into this master's hand as if it was revived. This semi-god tier combat weapon finally revealed its strength in this man's hand, and this item was giving off an intimate sensation as if it was a kid who finally reunited with his or her parents. Although this master of Jax didn't completely show off the power of the Sand of Earthly Anger, the pressure it gave was already breathtaking. Faye nodded and replied directly, "Okay." This master of Jax was far more powerful than Snow Mountain Hermit, and Faye couldn't defeat him in a battle. In addition, this man had the Sand of Earthly Anger and was smooth at using it. Making this man an enemy wasn't a wise idea. Besides, Faye knew that this man wasn't lying about the favor since he wasn't trying to pressure Faye into anything. His expression and tone were both really earnest. Faye knew that he interrupted and saved Snow Mountain Hermit this time for that favor, and this man wasn't going to do it again. "Thanks." This master of Jax smiled back at Faye to show his gratitude, and he put away the Sand of Earthly Anger. "You are welcome." Tink, tink, tink. As soon as Faye said that, a series of metal gliding noises sounded, and the huge pair of wings on Faye's back folded up. All the sword energies slowly combined into a massive sword in the end and disappeared. At the same time, Faye slowly landed on the altar on the northwest side and occupied the last spot. No one dared to object to Faye's action. The battle that just took place told everyone that the kings could beat anyone else that wasn't on the altar. The whole thing was settled. The people who didn't get on the altar were disappointed, desperate, and sad. They looked at the masters who got to claim elemental gates with envy. These masters were only one step away from entering the legendary level 36 region. People who got there had the potential of leveling up rapidly, and they had the opportunity of getting special combat weapons from Combat Weapons Tomb. It was too bad that they couldn't get there even though they risked their lives to get to this point. The 8 gates got claimed. Since this is the case, let's all activate the altar. The time is tight. Hazelbank looked at the masters on the altar and suggested. He knew that Faye was in a hurry to find the mythical altar, so he stood out and took the lead. "Okay, let's do it." The masters on the altar all nodded and agreed. They were all ready to inject their energies into the structures and open up the elemental gates. Wait for a second. This Zenitian shouldn't get to go." Someone sneered and interrupted. This person was one of 2 thin devil-like elders behind that huge emperor of Eindhoven, and he was pointing at Faye. He said in his hoarse voice, "There are 8 elemental gates here, but the people of Zenit claim 2 of them. It is not fair." After hearing what this old man said, everyone finally noticed that Zenitians took 2 elemental gates. Faye was one of them, and the blue-haired mid-aged man and his 2 guards were apparently from the Zenit Empire as well. Now, some people in the area were getting upset. Even though the Holy Church was dominating, they only took 1 elemental gate, and 7 out of the 12 people were left outside. Could a level 1 empire be more dominating than the Holy Church? For a moment, everyone was looking at Faye and the blue-haired mid-aged man. The blue-haired, mid-aged man sneered, and he didn't say anything. His powerful aura told everyone that he wasn't going to back off. If anyone wanted to challenge him, they were welcome to fight him. However, who would dare to challenge such a powerful man? After Fei gave it some thought, he looked at the masters who were standing by the edge of the altar. Some of them were desperate, as it looked like they were so old that they were close to their death. "I can take 4 people with me," he said. He pointed at 4 old masters who felt righteous and were at the verge of a breakthrough in death. "You 4 can stand in this elemental altar with me." "Ah? Really? Thank you, young king. Thank you so much. Gods will bless you, young man. I owe you a huge favor." The 4 masters who were pointed out by Fei were ecstatic. One of the masters, who had a full head of white hair, even cried in excitement. He was desperate before, and his dream suddenly came to life. Even experienced cultivators couldn't hold still when this sudden change hit them. He thanked Fei repeatedly and stated that he would pay Fei back in the future. 3 people could stand in that gate as well. Fei pointed at the elemental gate that Hazelbank and Arthur were standing in. "Ha! Since the king of Chambord already mentioned it, then we will take 3 more people as well." The undead mage had lived for hundreds of years, and he immediately understood Fei's intentions. Since Fei wanted to establish some friendship and get some influence over these masters, he quickly followed that up with an appropriate response. From an outsider's perspective, it seemed like this mysterious master did a favor for the king of Chambord. It was worth mentioning that these people were influential and powerful figures in the outside world. Although they seemed weak in the mythical palace, they were capable of a lot on the Azeroth continent. This investment made by Fei was very valuable. 3 more people got on the altar, and they thanked both Fei and Hazelbank for their generosity. They all promised that they would repay this generous gesture in the future. "Ha! The gods taught us that helping others is helping oneself." That master from Jax suddenly laughed and said to Fei, "Since the king of Chambord is this generous, I will do the same. Think of it as a small repayment of the favor you have done for me. I can take 3 people as well." This man pointed at 3 people in the crowd. They were Farrington, Modoc, and another elder. Both Snow Mountain Hermit and Tony weren't considered. Fei was a little surprised by what happened. This master of Jax was being a little selfish and picked 2 people of Jax. Even if Fei didn't do anything, it seemed like he would still take Farrington and Modoc with him. However, this man seemed majestic and was probably an influential figure in the Jax Empire. The fact that he was willing to take a random stranger with him was a huge friendly gesture. Out of the other elemental gates, the ones that were taken by the Holy Church and the Crown Prince of the Saint Germain Empire were full, and it was clear that the blue-haired mid-aged man wasn't welcoming. That white-robed, mysterious mage had an impatient look on his face, and the chilling energy surge around him scared a lot of people. No one dared to ask him. Also, that huge bald man and the 2 thin devil-like old men didn't look like nice people, and it was almost clear that they would rather waste a seat than helping others in the area. The people who weren't on the altar all looked at Fei with hoping eyes. They wanted Fei to put in a word for them. However, Fei could only shake his head. He knew that he couldn't make everyone listen to him. Hazelbank and the Master of Jax were willing to do him a favor, but it didn't mean that others would do the same. If he opened his mouth and asked, he would be looking for trouble. Besides, most of the people who were left all seemed vicious and violent. Fei didn't want to help them. "Okay, it looks like we don't have different opinions, so let's activate the altar and open the elemental gates," Hazelbank suggested again. "Wait, who said I'm fine with the current arrangement? Hee, I still have a lot to say." That old man laughed and interrupted again. He stared at Fei viciously with his cloudy eyes, pointed at Fei with his finger, and stated, "I suddenly feel like this kid isn't worthy of an elemental gate. Kick him out, and I suggest we choose him instead." As he said that, he pointed at Snow Mountain Hermit, who was in shock as well. This old man wanted Fei to give his spot to Snow Mountain Hermit. The people in the area took a while before finally reacting to this incident. Although they didn't know why this devil-like old man was going crazy, they knew that he didn't like the king of Chambord and wanted to cause trouble for him. Could it be that this old man has a grudge against the king of Chambord? Everyone was guessing that. After a short pause, Faye's face dropped as he looked at this old man coldly. "Who are you? How dare you point your fingers at me?" he sneered. "Hee hee, young man. Don't be so impulsive. Being pointed at is the least of your worries," that old man said as he started to walk towards Faye. A cloud of black mist was surging around his body, and it felt very powerful. With a mocking smile on his face, he laughed and said, "I just don't like you, and I don't want you to enter the elemental gate. Hee hee hee. You are only the king of a small affiliated kingdom under Zenith. Everyone else here is a powerful and famous master. In comparison, you are just a little junior. How are you qualified to take their place and get this elemental gate? Hee hee, even the martial saint of Zenith got butchered, and Zenith declared war against 3 empires at the same time. It will be conquered sooner or later, and everyone from the nobles to the poor people would be turned into slaves. Hee hee. Why should this elemental gate be wasted on you?" Murderous lights appeared in Faye's eyes, but he calmed down even more. "This old man is only a top-tier new moon elite, and he is far weaker than me. How dare he speaks to me like this? Could it be that he is relying on something or someone?" Faye looked over this old man that was approaching him and locked his eyes onto that huge bald man who was standing below an elemental gate. With a vicious smile on his face, this huge bald man was looking at Faye as well. This huge bald man was one of the few people who Faye couldn't see through. This man had an extremely dangerous sensation around him, and Faye felt like he couldn't defeat this man. Perhaps this old man is relying on this master, Faye thought. He didn't know when he offended such a master, and it would be a massive headache for him. However, Faye immediately categorized this man as his enemy without hesitation. Since this man already showed his hostility, Faye won't act soft and try to get a peace treaty. Also, the stronger the enemy, the calmer the king. Although he didn't show anything on the surface, the murderous spirit on his mind was getting more and more intense. However, no matter what, this dark and thin old man must die. Some scales were running in the opposite direction on a dragon's body, and anyone who touches it will die. Marshal St. Krasik was very important on Faye's mind. Since this old man insulted Krasik, Faye made up his mind and was determined to make this old man pay. As the king calculated the distance and the angle, he secretly raised his power level. The air around him was being frozen. Too bad. I wasn't able to kill the martial saint of Zenith. The brain of a martial saint must be delicious. That old man said that as he raised his warrior energy. A series of crackling noises sounded as he stretched his body, and his arms increased 30 centimeters in length. The hard and black fingernails on his fingers were about half a meter long, and they were being dragged on the stone tiles on the ground as if they were powerful weapons. Creak. Several deep scratch marks were left on the stone tiles. The suspension was real. The battle could happen at any time. After sensing the intense murderous spirit on this old man, the masters, who got the opportunity to enter Elemental Gate, due to Faye's generosity, looked at each other and stepped out. Even though they knew that they couldn't defeat this old man, they still blocked his way. Hee hee. You guys are old, yet you guys are dumb as well. How dare you block my way? That old man laughed angrily as he ground his long metal-like black fingernails against each other. As the ear-piercing noise sounded and the energy surge around him got even more powerful, he yelled, "Since you guys want to be on his side, I will dig out your brains. You all have to die." Faye was touched by what these 4 old masters were doing. He knew that he didn't choose the wrong people. After some thinking, he stepped forward and said to those 4 men, "Don't worry, I can't take care of this clown myself." Then, "Please be careful, Your Majesty." After some hesitation, one of them signaled Faye about the huge bald man who was standing not too far away and sneering. These old masters were afraid that the king would overlook that powerful man due to inexperience. Faye smiled and nodded back at them, showing them that he knew the situation. Hee hee. Die, arrogant kid. How dare you to be distracted when facing me? As this old man shouted, he dashed towards Faye like black lightning, and his sharp fingernails left a series of afterimages in the air as it struck at Faye's forehead. It was clear that this strike was this old man's ultimate technique. As the fingernails struck down, it seemed like it couldn't be dodged. Although this attack seemed slow, it was actually really fast. With the faint sensation of natural laws, those fingernails were almost touching Faye's forehead. A surprised smile appeared on this old man's face. He was planning for a hard fight as he knew that he was still a bit away from this young king. He was only going to provoke this young man, and others would take care of the rest. However, it seemed like this young man was too arrogant and gave the perfect opportunity to him. This old man sneered. He felt like he already saw the scene where this young genius brain matter was flying in the air. Everyone in the area gasped as they saw this terrifying scene. This old man's fingernails didn't enter the king of Chambord's head. But that was only an afterimage. The sneer turned into a scream, and the surprised smile also froze on this old man's face. He didn't feel the familiar sensation of penetrating through a skull. Instead, he was using so much force that his 10 fingernails collided. As sparks appeared, his hands were numbed and in pain for a few seconds. This was the last thing that he sensed. It was almost unbelievable that someone was able to only move his head alone that quick. But Faye did it. With a smile on his face, Faye watched his opponent's fingernails passing by 3 centimeters in front of his eyes. Then, he clenched his fist and punched out with silver flames enveloping his hands. This punch was impressive and nothing was held back. If the strike lands, this old man who only had the strength of top-tier New Moon would die. Without question, this old man would be turned into a cloud of blood mist even if his body was strong. However, someone was trying to stop this from happening. As soon as Faye punched out, the huge bald man who was more than 3 meters tall showed a wicked smile on his face as he unleashed his power. He had been waiting for this opportunity for a while now. However, he wasn't the only planner here. When he was about to make his move, 2 powerful energies locked onto him. This man sensed a life-threatening danger, and his body stiffed. He knew that if he attacked that young king, both of these energies would land on him mercilessly. Even though he was strong, he knew that he would be injured if that happened. One of the energies was from Hazel Bank. This undead mage was sly, and he already saw through everything. He knew that this huge bald man wanted trouble, so he was waiting patiently for this man to move. His full moon strength and his experiences were enough to scare a lot of people. Even though some of the undead mage was leaked, his strength was enough to shake the ground. The other energy was from the blue-haired, mid-aged man. This was surprising. Who could have thought that this man who didn't show the king of Chambord any favor would help the king of Chambord out at this moment? This blue-haired, mid-aged man was insanely powerful, and his every move brought a lot of pressure to others. The huge bald man instantly got cautious as he didn't know if he could win in a battle against this man. This huge bald man felt powerless. He wasn't afraid of battling neither of them, but a 1v2 would be hard. Therefore, he couldn't do anything but to watch the battle between Faye and that old man unfold. Bam! A cloud of blood mist appeared. That old man was in a disadvantage, and the help that he expected didn't arrive on time. The murderous spirit in the king of Chambord's eyes scared him, and he regretted doing what he did. Even though he felt like he was in a freezer, he could only watch the king's fist land on his body. Boom! A terrifying, limb-tearing sensation appeared. At this moment, this old man hated the vitality of moon-class elites. Since his body was strong, he didn't die right away. He could clearly feel how his muscles were being torn apart. It felt like knives were cutting him bit by bit. If he could do this over again, he won't have ever provoked the king of Chambord. After this pain kept up for a dozen seconds, he lost all of his consciousness. His body was turned into a rainfall of blood and chipped bones. You deserve to die over 1,000 times for insulting the martial saint of Zenith. Faye's voice sounded by everyone's ears as the silver flame on his fist shook away the blood stain. You killed him? After the 2 energies that were targeting him disappeared, an angry expression appeared on that huge bald man's face as he shouted, "Kill him? That is only the beginning. Remember, I will one day kill you as well." Faye wasn't scared, and he stared back at the huge bald man. He didn't back off at all in front of the huge pressure, even though it increased by multiple folds when this huge bald man got furious. The king was determined that he would one day kill this man. The latter was already very hostile towards Fei and tried to cause trouble for him, and the thin old man also got instructed by this man to provoke him and insult Marshal St. Krasik. On top of that, having such a dangerous man as an enemy would be terrible for him and the Chambord kingdom. However, Fei's declaration shocked everyone in the area. Even though the king of Chambord displayed extraordinary power and potential, he was still not able to fight with the huge bald man. The power this man displayed was mid-tier full moon, which was a rank higher than the king of Chambord. Such a difference was hard to ignore. Why the king of Chambord so confident? How dare he say that he is going to kill this huge bald man? People thought, ha ha ha. What? You said you want to kill me? Ha ha ha. The huge bald man was experiencing a roller coaster of emotions. His anger quickly turned into shock, and he started to laugh. As if he heard the funniest joke, his tears also dripped down his face. Ha 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 ha. Great. This is great. It is my first time hearing something this stupid. Ha ha ha, even that trash Marshal St. Krasik won't dare to say that. Ha ha ha. I will give you this opportunity. I, Emperor Kromkamp of Eindhoven, will wait for you to kill me. Ha ha ha. This huge bald man revealed his identity, and everyone in the area gasped. This huge bald man is the Emperor of Eindhoven. What a surprise. A lot of people in the area didn't hear the comment made by one of the old men, and they were shocked by this information. It was heard that Emperor Kromkamp of Eindhoven was a great cultivator, but his violent and murderous nature scared all the people of Eindhoven. No one dared to say anything bad about him because whoever said those things got their tongues cut off. Within this region, Emperor Kromkamp was infamous for his cruelty. However, it was heard that this man was a talented warrior in his youthful years, but he got defeated by Emperor Yasin of Zenit. Therefore, his personality changed, and he hated every person in Zenit dearly. He had once killed more than 100,000 innocent citizens of Eindhoven because he suspected that they might be the blood of Zenit running in them. Therefore, once his identity was known, it made sense why he hated the king of Chambord. Most of the time, Kromkamp was the representation of a tyrant and a demon lord. However, it was strange that he mysteriously appeared in the mythical palace with only 2 ghost guards. Could it be that something special is going to happen? Otherwise, why would the Emperor of Eindhoven and the Royal Master of Jax both appear here? Some people already sensed something special. Emperor of Eindhoven? You will pay for what you did today. Fei sneered. What you said will create numerous conflicts. I hope you can still laugh this happily when the Cavaliers of Chambord conquer the capital of Eindhoven. You? This tyrant was finally triggered by Fei's words, and he wanted to kill this young king. Shut up. You guys have wasted too much of my time. If you want to enter the level 36 region, then activate the elemental gates. If you guys need to finish this off, do it in the level 36 region. That mysterious white-robed mage who was silent with his eyes closed suddenly opened his eyes and spoke. Dangerous lights were flashing in his green eyes, and even Emperor Kromkamp, who was powerful, felt a little scared when he saw those eyes. Buzz! After that mysterious mage said that, he glanced around coldly and pressed his palm on the elemental gate that was more than 4 meters tall. As he injected his energy into it, that gray and lifeless structure suddenly changed. The magic runes engraved on it started to shine, and the structure soon lit up as a whole. Buzz! Buzz! The masters on the altar started to inject their energies into the elemental gates, and a series of light, buzzing noises sounded. The elemental gates began to be activated one by one, and strange energy surges appeared. Humph! The Emperor of Eindhoven sneered, and he put his hand on the elemental gate he was standing in. However, he was still staring at Fei viciously. With a mocking smile on his face, Fei shrugged his shoulder and injected some magic energy into the elemental gate that was on the northwest side of the altar. Even though barbarians were known for their close-range combat techniques and terrifying strength and was not related to magic which required a lot of intelligence, it wasn't the reality. Many of barbarians' skills, including whirlwind and leap attack, all required some mana to activate. Right now, all of the attribute points Faye got from leveling up were put into strength, and he didn't have much mana. However, there was still enough to activate an elemental gate. Soon, the 8 elemental gates on the elemental altar lit up with blue lights. Then, something extraordinary happened. The flat stone plates on the altar started to move as if something was typing on a keyboard. Then, the altar started to rotate like a big turntable. This made Faye feel like the altar was like a radio that was trying to connect with a specific frequency. The entire process took less than 30 seconds, and light blue ripple-like flames appeared in the 8 elemental gates. The people who were standing in them started to become vague. It was a sign of teleportation. Ah, damn it! Got to risk it! Someone suddenly screamed under the altar. He rushed towards the altar and wanted to get into the level 36 region. Unfortunately, before he could reach the altar, he was turned into blood mist by an invisible energy. This scene made the other masters who wanted to do the same lose the last bit of hope. In the next moment, the blue light turned extremely bright, and the space twisted as if everything became chaotic. Then, the masters standing in the 8 elemental gates all disappeared. After all that was done, the energy surges on the altar disappeared, and what happened before seemed like a hallucination. The disappointed masters jumped onto the altar and tried to inject energy into the elemental gates to activate them again, but nothing happened. Didn't matter how hard they tried. After a while, the people started to leave. Some of these people weren't willing to leave the mythical palace, so they went back to other regions to find treasures. If they were lucky, they could still find the treasures that the previous generations didn't get. Worst come to worst, they could just find magic arrays that were slightly challenging just like other normal masters. They still had the chance of breaking through their current level. Let's go. Snow Mountain Hermit sighed. He looked at his disciple Tony, who was shivering in fear, and unexpectedly, he didn't try to punish this young man. On top of that, it seemed like he still cared about this young man who just sold him out. Tony himself was even shocked. Master isn't going to kill me? His attitude didn't even change. Even though he was still confused, he wasn't that afraid anymore. What he said before offended a lot of masters, and a few of them looked at him funny before they left. Therefore, he had to follow Snow Mountain Hermit tightly. At least it seemed like his master had already forgiven him. It was a lot safer than being alone and having to fight those masters. Although Snow Mountain Hermit participated in the battle for Elemental Gates and lost to the King of Chambord, his strength couldn't be ignored. On top of that, Farrington, who had the semi-god tier combat weapon, showed enough respect for him. The few masters who wanted to kill Tony left with cold smiles on their faces. In their eyes, Snow Mountain Hermit was going to kill his disrespectful disciple who betrayed him. Let's go and find a proper place to recover. When our strengths return to normal, we should leave the mythical palace and go back to Big Snow Mountain immediately. Remember, from now on, don't ever be enemies of the King of Chambord. This man is too dangerous. You won't be able to take him on at all. Snow Mountain Hermit was really disappointed, and has created a fire elemental warrior energy sphere to envelop and protect Tony. As Snow Mountain Hermit walked in the front, Tony couldn't do anything but to follow. If he stayed here in the level 34 region alone, he would die for sure. However, it was clear that none of what Snow Mountain Hermit said registered in this gloomy young man's head. First of all, he was beat by Faye in front of tens of thousands of soldiers. Then, the rare opportunity of getting an elemental gate got snatched away. Right now, he hated Faye to an extreme degree, and he couldn't just let it go. Lights were flashing in Tony's eyes, and it seemed like he was planning something bad. Soon, all the other masters who didn't get to enter the level 36 area left. However, none of them noticed that a series of ripples appeared behind them, and a blond boy who was wearing black metal armor reappeared on the altar. As he looked at the direction where Snow Mountain Hermit and Tony disappeared, a naive yet chilling smile appeared on his face. Damn it! That old bastard and Alexander didn't bring me through the elemental gate. Damn it! Shameless. Pisses me off. Hehe. Since these two dumbass have to recover their strength first, I can go find something to drink first. Haha. After the undead bone dragon said that, he disappeared. The scene in front of everyone changed, and it felt like millions of years passed by in just a flash. When everything turned normal again, Faye was quite shocked. In front of him there was a thick forest. Various types of trees that had been around for ages covered the sky, and the green grasses were tall and filled this world. Hearing the noises made by birds and breathing in the fresh air, Faye felt refreshed. All the pores on his body opened up a little, and he felt like he was in heaven. Faye never expected that the level 36 region in the mythical palace would be like this. There wasn't any invisible energy barrier in the sky, and there weren't any ancient structures. This was literally another world. The liveliness in this place was heaven compared with all other lifeless regions. It was still winter in the outside world, but it felt like spring in this mysterious place. The air was moist, and the plants were green. It felt like this was literally in another world. If Faye wasn't wrong, this was a small world that the super powerful masters in the ancient time could create. It was similar to the space inside Akira's tent in Rogue Encampment that was created by their ancestors. It turned out that the elemental gates were the entrances to this small world. Faye only realized what happened after a while. Beside him, there were the 4 old masters who were standing with him in the elemental gate on the northwest side of the altar. It was clear that the 4 of them entered this place for the first time, as well as they were shocked as well. Suddenly, Faye thought of something and looked around cautiously. To his surprise, he couldn't see anyone else except for the 5 of them. All other masters who entered this place through other 7 elemental gates were nowhere to be found. Faye used his spirit energy and scanned the area around him that had a 1-kilometer radius, and he couldn't sense those people. The level 36 region is probably huge, and perhaps the 8 portals represent the 8 areas in this place. Therefore, other masters such as Hazelbank and that royal master of Jax were teleported to other places, Faye guessed. However, since they were in the same world, they would meet up soon. Faye wasn't too worried about that. Ah! God! What are those? Dragon-breathed grasses? Am I hallucinating? There are dragon-breathed grasses here? That much? One of the old masters beside Faye looked at one side, and he screamed out of surprise. His eyes almost popped out of his eye sockets, and it looked like he saw something unimaginable. Faye looked in the direction that this master was staring at, and he was shocked as well. They were standing on a tall peak, and they saw a bunch of red mushroom-like grasses on another summit about 100 meters away. They were fluttering a little in the wind, and they were releasing clouds of red mists into the air that were more than 10 meters long and wide. They were all over that peak, and they were emitting a sweet aroma. Faye felt a little dizzy after breathing in the air. They are actually dragon-breathed grass. So much dragon-breathed grass. Faye was shocked, and the legend about these special grasses appeared in his head. It was heard that there was a special type of demon beast called red dragon snake. Although they were special, they didn't have strong reproductive abilities. There were less than 100 of them in the beginning, and there were still these demon beasts after thousands of years. They just won't die. The unique thing about them was that they would swim towards the ocean. It was heard if they could get to the ocean, they would evolve into real dragons and soar in the sky. After all, dragons were at the top of the food pyramid. However, these special demon beasts were lazy and lacked persistence. In addition, they were self-centered and could easily get triggered. It was heard that they weren't willing to move forward on the way, and they were also unwilling to go back to their birthplace. In order to vent their anger, they spat out the venom and poisonous gas in their bodies onto the rocks at the bottom of rivers and lakes. After getting corroded by such matters for thousands of years, the rocks all turned into herbs that looked like mushrooms. This type of herb was known as dragon-breathed grass. Although the creation process of dragon-breathed grasses was terrifying, it had magical effects. It was heard that these herbs were delicious. After they were cooked, even the gods would drool over them. Also, masters who consumed them would be able to increase their energy and had the chance of getting dragon essence. A few lucky people had the opportunity of eating dragon-breathed grass, and almost all of them became sun-class lords. Of course, nothing was perfect in this world. Dragon-breathed grasses had their disadvantages. They would only mature after 1,000 years. All of them that were less than 1,000 years old were extremely poisonous. Even gods who were immortals would get killed if they consumed dragon-breathed grasses that contained 1,000 years' worth of red dragon snake's venoms and negative energies. Faye had been studying knowledge of herbs and natural ingredients with Akira for a while, and he was familiar with the legends around dragon-breathed grasses in the real world. Therefore, after he saw the red mists in the air and smelled the sweet aroma, he knew what those strangely shaped grasses were on the summit about 100 meters away. Whoosh! Whoosh! The 5 of them almost flew to the other peak instantly at the same time. Standing in front of rocks that had many dragon-breathed grasses on them, the masters, including Faye, were excited. However, since they were all experienced people, they kept their guards up and blocked the red poisonous mist using their energies. Red mist? Sweet aroma? Too bad. They are only 900 years old. They aren't mature yet. Faye was very disappointed. Ah, it looks like we aren't that lucky. Damn it. I only have about 10 years to live. But these dragon-breathed grasses need another 100 years. Ah, do we really have to let go of the treasures? No. Since we encountered them, we have to get something. These are dragon-breathed grasses after all. Some masters were unwilling to let go of this opportunity. One of them bent down and dug out one dragon-breathed grass with a handful of soil underneath it. After that, he placed it in his storage space. Even though he might not be able to use it, his descendants could. What he did inspired the other 3 old masters who were disappointed as well. They all dug out a few dragon-breathed grasses with soil and kept them in their storage space. However, these 4 old masters kept their greediness in check. They only took a few each. First of all, overharvesting would ruin this gifted place and harm their own lucks in the future. Second of all, they were only able to come here with Faye's generosity, so they felt like Faye deserved most of the treasures. After Faye thought about it for a while, he shook his head and didn't harvest any. Why aren't your majesty taking a few just in case? That old master with the whitest hairs suggested. I will keep them here and let them grow naturally. I still have opportunities to harvest them when they mature in the future, Faye said. He was only 18 years old, and he was already a moon-class elite. Right now, he had 300 years to live. If he advanced into the realm of sun-class, he would get 600 years to live. Therefore, he had handfuls of time to wait for these dragon-breathed grasses to mature. The 4 old masters all realized that as well. Faye's powerful presence made they overlook that fact that he was only an 18-years-old young man. After they thought about that, they got quite envious of Faye. After getting some immature dragon-breathed grasses, the 5 of them continued to move deeper into the forest. It was heard that there was no danger in the level 36 region, and this place was like heaven to all cultivators. After Faye got in here, he felt like that rumor was true. There wasn't any pressure in this world, and Faye and the other 4 old masters were able to fly in the sky speedily. Within 30 minutes, Faye and the old masters were shocked again and again. They had seen a lot of special herbs and plants in here, and they had various effects. The one thing in common was that they were all precious in the outside world. There were a few mature herbs that weren't inferior to dragon-breathed grass, and the 5 of them turned excited, then ecstatic, and lastly numbed in just a few minutes. They started to fill up their storage space like robots, and they felt like they were dreaming. That old master who didn't have many years to live got a silver Charlie. This god-tier herb was able to add 50 years to a person's life instantly, and that master cried in excitement. To him, 50 more years meant that he could cultivate more. Perhaps he could advance and increase his lifespan even more. Faye and the other 3 old masters got a lot of stuff as well. After spending some time in here, Faye clearly felt that this place was different compared to the outside world. All sorts of energy filled the air, and they were peaceful and calm, unlike the chaotic energies in the outside world. The energies in here were more suitable for direct absorption, and it was a cultivation heaven for masters who were on the verge of breakthroughs. On top of that, the natural laws in this place were clearer. If the natural laws in the outside world were like abstract paintings that only the geniuses could understand, the natural laws in this small world were like oil paintings that almost everyone could comprehend. Anyone who had some foundation would be able to sense the natural's laws and increase their levels rapidly. There are numerous treasures in here, and it is also a perfect place for cultivation. No wonder so many people fought for the opportunity of getting an elemental gate. However, Faye soon woke up from the luring treasures. Guys, I have something important to do, so I must leave alone. Let's separate from here on. Faye waved his hand at these 4 old masters and planned to seek the mythical altar alone. Although those 4 old masters wanted to stay with him, they didn't want to interfere with Faye's tasks and potentially negatively affect him. That old master named Rankle, who had white hair and white beard, thought for a while and reminded Faye, "Your Majesty, please be careful. After what happened, I don't think Emperor Cromcamp is going to let that go. He might try to kill you in here." I know. I will try to be careful. You guys need to be careful as well. I'm afraid that he might try to vent his anger on your guys. It is better for you all to stay on the outer edge of this world and cultivate. After all, we could only stay in here less than 30 days. After saying that, that huge pair of sword energy wings appeared on Faye's back, and he dashed away like a meteor. This young man isn't simple. The Emperor of Eindhoven has been arrogant his whole life, and he might suffer some losses. Rankle looked at the direction where Faye took off and thought, "It is hard to see through this young man. His strength is terrifying as well. It is fortunate that we are friends with him. After we get out, we should establish a good relationship with the Chambord Kingdom. I have a feeling that this king of Chambord is going to one day shock the continent." Another old master nodded and said, You guys are right. We have collected enough herbs. How about we find an isolated place to cultivate? We can look after each other and try to break through our current levels in here. After all, relying on herbs and external resources won't give us the most secure foundation. Another master suggested. Sounds good. They looked at each other and smiled. They didn't know each other in the outside world, but they were able to communicate and get to know each other after Faye brought them to the elemental gate. Together. They were all old masters, and their life limits were approaching. Their fates were similar, and that mutual understanding between them helped them to establish friendships. Therefore, the 4 of them found a natural cave on a mountain and started to cultivate. With his sword energy wings on his back, Faye was more than 1,000 meters in the air while dashing forward quickly. The mythical altar he was looking for was more than 1,000 meters tall, and it seemed majestic and powerful. Therefore, it should be a huge target, so it was easier for Faye to look around in the sky. This small world was huge. Faye flew for more than 50 kilometers, and he saw many mountains, forests, and waterfalls. This place was indeed beautiful, but Faye also sensed the energy given off by some powerful demon beasts. Faye even got chills when he got near them. However, he still didn't spot the mythical altar. Faye kept up his patience and continued the search. After almost half a day, Faye had almost searched an area of 500 kilometers radius. He had already gotten out of the forests, and he was now flying on top of a grassland. Unknown grasses were more than a meter long, and thick rivers flowed by. Herds of animals such as deer, sheep, and bulls were all running wild on the plain. Among them, there were powerful and vicious demon beasts. This scene gave Faye a strange feeling. He felt like he traveled through space and appeared on top of the grassland in Africa on Earth. He felt like he wasn't in a small world created by powerful ancient masters but back on Earth. After another half a day, he searched through this grassland and arrived at an area where there were a ton of hills. Unfortunately, Faye still didn't get anything. The only good thing was that he finally saw the collapsed castles and buildings. Although he could only vaguely see some broken walls and bases that were covered by soil and weed, they were the only things that Faye saw were made by humankind in this world. Also, it seemed like the style of the buildings were similar to the mythical altar recorded on the Demon King's wisdom, and it gave Faye, who was losing patience, some hope. After passing by the hills, he saw a huge and rich plain. It was lively and vivid. Except for humans and intelligent species, almost all other animals and plants could be seen. As Faye flew in the sky, he finally saw some abandoned buildings. There were castles, towers, farmlands, ponds, defense walls, corroded wooden houses, and tombstones. All these structures had been around for a long time, and they were all deformed and rigged. Could it be that there are actually native people in this small world? Otherwise, where did these structures come from? But there isn't a single corpse. It feels like all of the people who were living here all suddenly vanished. This is too strange. The more Faye observed, the more shocked he was. As he moved forward, he saw more and more structures created by humans. However, they were all abandoned for years, and there were no traces of living beings in them. After Faye moved forward for another 50 kilometers, something mystic occurred. Faye's dashing figure slowed down drastically for a second as if he was passing through a swamp, and that took only a second. After that, everything returned to normal. It seemed like a very stealth energy barrier. Faye thought as he turned around and looked behind him. Although everything seemed normal, he was sure that he wasn't hallucinating. After he shook his head, he turned around and was able to continue forward. As soon as he looked up, his body shivered violently, and he almost fell from the sky. Oh fuck! A floating castle? Damn! What? A sky castle? Faye felt like he was at a loss for words. What was in front of him was a huge floating castle. It was about 600 meters off of the ground, and judging from its shadow on the ground, it seemed like it covered an area of 3 kilometers radius. Also, the bottom of the castle looked like a mountain that was flipped upside down. Faye couldn't sense any energy surges on this castle, so he didn't know how it was able to float in the sky. A soft silver light enveloped the castle, including its mountain-like bottom, and it seemed like a whole thing was made by silver. It looked majestic and holy, and Faye felt like it was the castle of a god. In front of this miraculous castle, even someone as powerful as Faye felt inferior and had an urge of kneeling. In fact, judging from sizes alone, Faye was like an ant, and this castle was like a huge dragon. How come I didn't see this castle when I was far away? It felt like it just suddenly appeared here. Could it be? After he recovered from the shock, Faye suddenly recalled that he passed through an invisible energy barrier. Could it be that the energy barrier I just passed through could hide this castle? It hid this castle so well that I couldn't even sense it using my spirit energy. This was the only reasonable explanation that Faye could come up with. Flap, flap, flap. Faye's wings fluttered, and he slowly ascended and got to the defense wall of this sky castle. The defense wall was made from an unknown silver-colored metal, and it was only 100 meters tall. There was a space more than 1 kilometer wide outside the defense wall, and a clear moat circled the castle. There were green grasses and blossoming flowers on the ground before the defense wall, and it looked like heaven. Faye felt like he forgot all the worries in his life when he got there. Faye bent his back and touched the grasses with his hands. It was so real that it couldn't have been a hallucination. Staring at the defense wall that wasn't too far away, Faye didn't know what kind of emotion he should have. Shock? Surprise? Concern? Or doubt? He felt like he was experiencing those emotions at the same time, yet not really. Faye walked to the moat, and he stepped into it. He instantly felt the chilliness of the water, and he disturbed a few small red fishes that were looking for food. After passing by the moat, Faye finally arrived under the silver defense wall. He looked up at this majestic castle that looked like the residence of a god, and he was shocked by its beauty again. He reached out his hand subconsciously and lightly caressed the defense wall. He felt a warm and smooth sensation. Before he could react, he felt like a mystic energy pulled his soul, and the scene in front of his eyes changed. Boom! A series of battle noises sounded by his ears. Faye felt like he was on an ancient and bloody battlefield. The loud noises sounding beside his ears made him feel dizzy, and the thick, murderous spirits couldn't be dissolved. There were a ton of blood mists falling in front of Faye, so he looked up habitually. He saw figures of powerful masters flying and battling in the sky, and the scene looked cruel. If a peak full moon elite like Hazelbank appeared here, he would be killed by the murderous spirits before he could join the battle. It was terrifying. The scene in front of Faye continued to change. Powerful masters were dying on both sides, and Faye finally saw clearly that the location of the battle was in this sky castle. There were humans, orcs, demon beasts, and various other species and races. All of them were insanely powerful. They easily broke the space, and dashes of black cracks appeared in the sky. If any one of these masters were currently living in the outside world, they would be dominating rulers and invincible warriors. It seemed like even Sun-class lords were nothing in front of them. However, even though they were insanely powerful, they were like ordinary soldiers in this battle. There were so many of them that they looked like ants, and it seemed like their vitalities were even weaker. They continued to fall from the sky one by one. This battle could only be described as cruel. Masters were battling everywhere, and the legendary god-tier combat weapons and semi-god-tier combat weapons were also everywhere and were flashing by Faye like dashes of light. These legendary weapons cracked in mid-air like porcelain jars, and they fell alongside with the blood and broken limbs of the masters. It felt like the end of the world. Faye didn't know why this war broke out. Like an invisible person, he was witnessing this battle as an outsider, and the masters who were in battle couldn't see him as well. Faye was shocked. This was like the battle between the demons and the gods. They would easily break the continent and tear the sky. In the end, everything blurred, and Faye vaguely heard an angry roar that was enough to cause an earthquake and saw all the masters in the sky falling like raindrops. Then, Faye returned to reality. As he breathed heavily and sensed the warm and smooth defense wall, he suddenly realized that he was still standing before the sky castle. That terrifying battlefield was only an illusion, and it was now completely gone. The blue sky and white clouds were still above his head, and he was still standing on green grasses. So this huge city had witnessed that terrifying battle which occurred God knows how long ago. Perhaps that battle was so cruel that it left a mark in this world. And somehow, this defense wall that is made from an unknown material memorized some of the scenes. What I saw did indeed take place. Faye gradually realized what was going on. However, he wasn't less shocked. Such a terrifying battle took place in this world before, and so many powerful masters died, and it happened right here where I am standing. Who are the two forces? Are they really the demons and the gods? If that is the case, then the origins of the Sky Castle, the small world, and the mythical palace are all shocking. Are there still living beings inside this castle? Perhaps there are a ton of hidden dangers in the castle. All these thoughts rushed through Faye's head. However, in order to find the mythical altar, Faye had to enter the city and search. Since Faye walked around the defense wall and didn't find a gate, he had to flutter his silver sword energy wings and fly onto the defense wall. As he stood on top of the defense wall and took another look, he saw a perfect colossal castle. The entire city was made from a silver material, and it was extremely functional. The battle fortresses and tall magic towers were situated all around the city, and they made this sky castle into a terrifying battle beast. Even though Faye had seen a lot of majestic and impressive medieval castles on TV and the internet in his previous life, none of them could be compared to this one. There were a lot of wide streets, and the tall buildings with steeples in the castle, and majestic temples and plazas were like decorative pieces among them. Also, there were several military camps and training facilities. This entire castle was built around a mountain. A wide silver street extended from the defense wall to the mountain in the middle of the castle, and there were various structures, palaces, and huge human warrior statues on the mountain. This mountain in the center of the castle was so tall that its summit was in the clouds, and Faye wasn't able to see it. If the mythical altar exists, it should be inside this huge castle. The style of buildings in this castle was identical to the mythical altar, and Faye was reassured. However, Faye didn't sense any signs of life in here. As soon as Faye stepped a foot into the castle, his spirit energy spread out like waves in the ocean. This castle was dead. If there weren't holy and saint auras in this castle, Faye would have thought that he was inside a ghost city. Faye fluttered his wings and flew 400 meters above the ground. This time he was a lot slower and his searches were a lot more detailed. He wasn't willing to overlook any traces or clues as he traveled through the structures. After 3 hours, he searched all the structures on the outer edges of the castle, and he didn't find anything. Therefore, he started to fly higher toward that massive mountain in the center. While he was doing that, the sky darkened, and the evening was about to arrive. Even though there weren't a sun and a moon in this world, there were still days and nights. The lights in this world would lit up during the day and dim down during the evening. It showed that the methods and techniques of the masters who created this world were insane. After half an hour, Faye finally arrived at the summit of the mountain during the night. Unfortunately, he still didn't find the mythical altar or any potential clues. This mountain was about 300 meters tall, and it was made from an unknown type of white rock. The mountain wasn't too steep as it had a slope of 60 degrees with the ground, and there were various structures on it such as fortresses, magic towers, and military camps. Even though these structures were kept in good conditions, Faye still didn't sense any living beings. In fact, everything in this castle was in excellent condition, nothing like the ragged and collapsed buildings on the plains that Faye traveled through earlier. Perhaps it was due to the wind, no dust could be found on the structures as well. There was a palace comprised of 3 side palaces and 1 main palace on the summit. It wasn't huge and fancy, but it was firm and had a sense of nobleness to it. The foundation was structurally sound, and it lifted the palaces by 99 steps of stairs. Once someone climbed those 99 steps of stairs, they would arrive at the main gate of the palace. 2 huge warrior statues that were more than 200 meters tall were situated before the gate, and they brought Faye a lot of pressure. He felt like the power in these 2 statues alone weren't defensible. Standing at the gate of the palace, Faye was able to look down and see the entirety of the sky castle like a god who was living among the clouds. Somehow, he felt a little desolated and lonely. Unfortunately, he still didn't find the mythical altar. Faye was extremely disappointed. As he was about to flutter his wings and fly away, he suddenly turned around and walked into the palace. He felt like something was calling for him. Since it was already the evening, it was very dark in the palace. However, this wasn't an issue for Faye. The palace was really empty, and 24 stone pillars supported the ceiling that was more than 100 meters off the ground. These stone pillars were so thick that it required for people to wrap their arms around each pillar to hug it completely. The floor in the palace was made from the same white material, and it was smooth and reflective. While Faye walked on it, he could see the reflection of himself and the ceiling. Even though this was the case, the floor wasn't slippery at all. As he walked deeper into the palace, he saw a huge stone throne at the back. It was rough and looked like it was carved out of a massive piece of stone. Although it was large though to sit 2 people, Faye felt like only one person should sit on it for some reason. There was a small pond in front of the stone throne, and a few lotus-like plants were living in it. Even though they weren't blossoming, they were emitting golden lights. In the darkness, these clouds of golden lights seemed beautiful and holy. Suddenly, Faye had the urge of sitting on the throne. He walked to the stone throne, hesitated for a bit, and lightly sat on it. He might be hallucinating, but he felt like this entire world lightly shook. Then, he found 2 magic engravings well hidden in the armrests of the throne. They were smooth, and they also matched with the natural rough surface of the stone perfectly. If Faye weren't paying attention, he might have overlooked it. The magic engravings and arrays weren't complicated, but there were so many of them that Faye felt a light headache after concentrating on them for a bit. The engraving methods of the 2 magic arrays were rare, and they didn't seem like the methods used on Azeroth continent. After closer inspection, Faye was shocked. They were the magic arrays and engraving methods used in Diablo World. The magic systems used in Diablo World and the real world were completely different, and they were a little contradicting. However, after the mad scientist Kane went through both systems, he found some similarities. Faye had studied with Kane for a while. Although he wasn't a professional, he did have some understanding of it. After he studied them for a bit, he was able to decrypt these 2 not-too-complicated arrays. What are they for? Since he decrypted these 2 arrays, Faye, who was sitting on the stone throne, injected some of his magic energy into them subconsciously. Vague dark blue lights that were almost negligible traveled through the magic arrays, and the magic engravings on the throne bulged and looked like blood veins all of a sudden. Just as Faye wanted to move his hands, he realized that they were glued onto the throne. It didn't matter how hard he tried, he couldn't even move them by a millimeter. This discovery scared Faye to death. Faye felt like his hands and the stone throne became one. As the dark blue light grew stronger and stronger, more and more magic energy was pulled out of his body like a flood. Soon, the dark blue light became so bright that Faye was enveloped by it. In the next moment, Faye suddenly felt like the ground cracked, and the stone throne fell. Bam! As if he was on a turbo drop, he felt like the stone throne stopped falling after a few seconds. Soon, the blue light disappeared, and Faye was able to see things again. Faye saw a majestic structure in front of him, and he was overjoyed. The mythical altar. Haha, this is really the mythical altar. Ha 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 ha. I finally found it. I didn't find it over days of hard searching, but it appeared right in front of me. Faye laughed. He didn't find the mythical altar anywhere in the Sky City. When he was about to leave in disappointment, he somehow miraculously discovered it. So, the inside of this mountain and the bottom of the castle are hollow, and the mythical altar is situated inside of it. No wonder. The mythical altar is more than 1,000 meters tall, and it looks like a mountain. If I didn't accidentally activate the teleportation arrays on this stone throne, I would never be able to find this mythical altar. Faye realized that he appeared inside the mountain with the stone throne after he activated the magic arrays on it. The inside this mountain was 60% hollow. The white stone that formed this mountain were emitting weak silver lights, and they lit up this space. Right now, the king's hands were able to move freely. However, he was still sitting on the stone throne. This stone throne was floating in midair, and Faye felt like he had the control over it. He was able to move it forward, backward, up, down, left and right at his free will. In front of him, there was the majestic mythical altar. It was more than 1,000 meters tall, and ordinary people couldn't have created it. The craftsmanship and techniques required to build this structure were out of this world. If someone looked up at the altar from the bottom, they would feel like it was a pillar that connected with the sky. Beside this altar, there were 18 bronze warrior statues that were more than 100 meters tall each. Just like what Faye saw in the image projected by Demon King's wisdom, these warriors were all dwarf warriors, and they looked like 18 dwarf kings who were enlarged by multiple folds. Faye lowered the stone throne and started to observe this altar from the bottom up. This altar could be divided into 9 levels, and each level was circular and stacked on top of each other. The diameter of each level was 2/3 of the level below it, and the 9th level was only a circular platform that had a diameter of about 10 meters. There were 4 sets of stone stairs on the north, south, east, and west sides of the altar. They were all 4 meters wide. They led from the bottom level to the 9th level on the very top, and there were 99 steps of stairs on each level. It seemed like the creator of this structure was in love with the number 9. After Faye got closer to the altar, he realized that there were numerous hair-thin magic engravings on it. Faye didn't dare to take a closer look. The magic engravings were complicated, and people who didn't have enough spirit energy and magic energy would get their souls sucked into it if they forced themselves to look at it for a long time. Faye only took a quick peek at it, and he felt a headache and was sick to his stomach. Faye didn't take more detailed observations. Instead, he controlled the stone throne and flew to the highest platform on the altar. Then, he jumped off the stone throne and onto the 9th level of the mythical altar. He started to look for the place where the stained world stone could be purified. Soon, the king's eyes landed on a location. In the center of this altar, there was a half-broken stone pillar. On top of the broken pillar, there was a thick black book. The cover page of the book was metal, and it looked strange with thorn flower-like metal decorative pieces on it. However, this book gave Faye a peculiar familiar feeling. Why does it look like Demon King's wisdom? Faye finally realized why this book looked familiar to him. It didn't matter if it was in terms of appearance or aura. This book was almost identical to the book Demon King's wisdom Faye got from that mysterious stone room. Looking from afar, they seemed like the same book. Faye got close to it and slowly reached out for it. In the same time, he summoned the iron gloves from Diablo World just in case if there were magic traps or dangerous mechanisms protecting the book. He only let go of the breath that he was holding in after his hand grabbed onto it. Nothing dangerous happened. Demon King's sword? Faye slowly read out the name of the book that was on the cover. Suddenly, he realized why this book looked so similar to Demon King's Wisdom. They belonged to the same series. He remembered that there was a sentence written on Demon King's Wisdom using the blood of a powerful master. It mentioned that Demon King His Majesty left a series of gifts including Demon King's Wisdom, Demon King's Punishment, Demon King's Sword, Demon King's Memory, Demon King's Wishes, Demon King's Calculations, and etc. Faye thought Demon King's Sword was a god-tier combat weapon, but who knew that it was a book as well? What is recorded here? Why is it called Demon King's Sword? Faye flipped open the book subconsciously, and he saw this phrase written on the first page. "We will attack anyone who isn't our king." Faye recited this phrase several times in his mind, and he suddenly felt like this phrase was cool. Although it sounded ordinary, it contained unparalleled loyalty and iron will. It would be perfect if this phrase becomes the motto of the soldiers of Chambord, he thought. As he flipped to the next few pages, the expression on Faye's face turned from surprise to shock to ecstasy. It seemed like the language used in Demon King's Sword was a combination of the words in Diablo World and the words in the real world. Both Cain and Akira had spent a lot of effort on studying this language, and they forced Faye to learn some of it as well. Therefore, although Faye was slow and stuttered a lot, he was still able to make out the content of the book. To his surprise, this book recorded all kinds of cultivation techniques and combat techniques that Faye even never heard of before. In addition, it contained magic spells, magic arrays, engraving techniques, body strengthening techniques, spirit energy cultivation techniques, blueprints for all kinds of weapons including combat weapons, semi-god tier combat weapons, and god tier combat weapons. It was literally a cultivation and weapon encyclopedia. Faye only saw the table of content and a first few pages, but he was already shocked to the maximum. There were too many technical terms in the book. In addition to the complex language, there were a ton of diagrams and illustrations. Faye already got a headache after he was a few pages in, and he had to force himself to stop reading. This is a god-tier book that is not inferior to Demon King's Wisdom. If the people on Azeroth continent know about this, they will go crazy over it. Even the level 9 empires and the Sun-class lords would kill for it. After taking a few peeks, Faye realized the value of Demon King's Sword. But this book is just laying here without any protection, and I didn't encounter any danger in this sky castle. Therefore, it means that this book is not hard to discover. So why is it still here? The mythical gate had opened more than dozen times. So more than 500 masters had entered this small world. Am I the first person who discovered this? Faye felt like he was dreaming when he thought about this. He couldn't understand why he was so lucky. Even though he was cautious and skeptical, Faye still carefully placed Demon King's Sword into his storage space. After all, this type of fortune was rare, and this kind of treasure was precious. Anyone who would give it up would be an idiot. After grabbing Demon King's Sword, Faye's attention focused on the half-broken pillar that the god-tier book rested on. The surface was rough, and it didn't seem like someone cut it in half. It felt like someone cracked it into two parts by force. The upper half of the pillar was nowhere to be found, but the lower half of the pillar was left on this altar. There was a half-oval-shaped dent on the rough surface of this pillar, and Faye thought about it, took out the stained world stone, and laid it in the dent. It was a perfect match. It wasn't big or small. It felt like this dent was meant for this world stone to sit in. Half of the world stone was inside the pillar, and the other half of it was exposed in the air. After Faye walked around and took more detailed observations, he didn't spot any magic arrays or magic engravings on this half-broke pillar. He had no idea how to activate this mythical altar and purify the stained world stone. Suddenly, Faye thought back to the reminders Akira and Cain gave him. He returned to the stone throne that was floating in midair, and he controlled the stone throne and went to the bottom of the altar. After Faye got to the bottom of the altar, he walked around it and started to look for clues. It would take an average person at least half an hour to circle this altar. To the north of this altar, Faye discovered something that he didn't see when he was skimming through. There was a huge skeleton on the ground. It was at about 4 meters tall, and its bones were a lot thicker than ordinary human bones. Except for those, it wasn't too different from a normal human skeleton. One thing for sure was that this person must be a powerful master when he or she was alive. Even though this corpse had been here numerous years and the flesh on it were all corroded away, the bones were still tough and firm. Fei tried to test one of the thinnest finger bones, and he realized that it was several times harder than the demon's remains he found in the underground cave in Chambord Castle. For some reason, Fei thought of a person when he saw this corpse. Emperor Kromkamp of Eindhoven. Perhaps this skeleton is one of his ancestors. Only someone with a Titan-like bloodline could be about 3 meters tall like Kromkamp, Fei thought. What was surprising about this scene was how this master was killed here years ago. A half-broke stone pillar penetrated through this person's body from the back, crushed through the heart, nailed him or her into the ground. It must have been painful for this master since Fei saw several shocking scratch marks on the ground. This skeleton was slightly bent, showing that this master was trying to reach out to the pillar and pull it out. However, it was a fail and he or she ended up dying here. As Fei looked at this huge skeleton, he felt like he could visualize the terrifying scene where a half-broke stone spill flew down from the sky and nailed a powerful master into the ground. Wait! A half-broken stone pillar. Fei grasped onto something. He looked at the stone pillar that nailed the skeleton to the ground, and he then walked over. Instantly, he saw a half-sphere dent on top of the half-broken pillar that was 6 meters out of the ground. Also, the rough surface where the pillar broke off matched the surface of the half-broken pillar on the 9th level of the mythical altar. Yeah, this half-broken pillar is the missing half of that pillar. Someone broke it off and threw it 1,000 meters down here to kill this huge master. As Fei thought about this, he looked at the half-sphere dent on this half-broke pillar more and more. He felt like something mystic would happen if he brought this half-broken pillar onto the 9th level of the altar. Fei didn't hesitate after thinking about that. He looked around, stepped onto the skeleton, and wrapped his arms around this pillar. As he shouted, his nightmare mode level 40 barbarian unleashed all of his physical strength. The muscle on his arms bulged up and increased twice in size, and a visible energy surge expanded outward and dispersed into the area. Boom! This half-broke pillar lightly shook as if it was going to be pulled out by Fei. However, it didn't move after that. Even though Fei gave it all he had, he couldn't successfully pull it out. It was shocking. No master in the Moon class could compete with Fei's Nightmare Mode level 40 barbarian's physical strength, and Fei was still not able to pull this half-broke pillar out of the ground. In comparison, it was hard to imagine the strength of the master who broke the pillar and threw it down from the top of the mythical altar. After exhaling deeply, Fei summoned all of his items from Diablo World that could increase his strength. His strength increased by 20 points. Boom! He tried again, and the pillar shook more violently. However, he failed again. It felt like there was a strong suction force in the ground, and this half-broken pillar was hard stuck. Since he couldn't pull it out directly, Fei tried to dig holes around the pillar to loosen it up. Unfortunately, the ground was made from the unknown silver rock, and it was extremely firm. Fei tried his best, but he wasn't even able to leave a small dent on it. This finding stunned Fei. The toughness of the ground was beyond his imaginable, and the rock that made up this mountain was probably not ordinary. This skeleton under his feet was able to leave several scratch marks on the ground. From the look of it, it seemed like even Sun-class lords couldn't even do so. On top of that, another master was able to nail this half-broke pillar into the ground from the 9th level of the mythical altar and kill this powerful master on the ground. His or her strength was probably beyond reason. The secret to purifying the world stone must lie on this half-broke pillar. However, I still couldn't pull it out yet. It looks like I need to enter Diablo World to level up first. After 5 hours, a blue portal suddenly appeared before the mythical gate, and Fei walked out it with fatigue written on his face. In the last 5 hours, Fei completed the quest, the Arcane Sanctuary, by killing the monsters in there, and he also killed the boss, the summoner, and completed the next quest. After that, he went to Canyon of the Magi to complete the quest, the 7 tombs. When the gaming time of the day was almost up, he found 3 fake tombs already. By now, he was a Nightmare Mode level 42 barbarian, and he put all 10 attribute points into strength. Before he returned to the real world, he went to the NPCs in Lutgolian and bought a few great items that gave him more strength. He only returned to the mythical altar after he finished doing the proper preparation. I have to pull it out this time. Faye equipped all of those items and walked up to that half-broke pillar again. As he took a deep breath and shouted, all of his muscles went into overload. The loud booming noises made it seem like the ground was about to be torn apart. Even the mountain and the mythical altar were shaking slightly. Little by little, the half-broken pillar that was deep into the ground got pulled out by Faye. After 10 minutes and several attempts, it was finally all out. What surprised him was that the portion of the half-broken stone pillar was way longer than he thought. It was longer than 20 meters. Perhaps it was because that it was buried underground. Its color was brighter than the portion that was exposed in the air. Its shiny metal-like silver color would make people think that it was a half-broken weapon like a spear rather than a stone pillar. This half-broken pillar was 26 meters long in total. Faye was sweating buckets and breathing heavily at this moment. This was the first time that he got this exhausted as a barbarian. He felt like he was about to pass out. After drinking a bottle of stamina potion and resting for about half an hour, he finally returned to his normal state. Then, he opened up his silver sword energy wings and tried to fly back onto the 9th level with this half-broken pillar. This half-broken pillar was extremely heavy, and Faye had to rest several times on the mythical altar. Due to the overload, the skin on his arms was torn, his muscles were severely damaged, and a lot of flesh on his fingers were ground away, revealing the white bones. The intense pain made Faye sweat even more, and the sweat stained the entire half-broken pillar alongside the blood. In the end, this entire half-broken pillar got dyed red. Faye had never felt this much pain and had never used this much energy before. He felt like someone was making numerous small cuts on his arms, and his upper body soon got numbed. However, like a robot, he forced himself to grasp onto the half-broken pillar and pulled it up using his iron will. Even though Faye got severely injured a few times in Diablo World and experienced an insane amount of pain, they weren't as unbearable as this. The thoughts of giving up appeared several times in his head, but he clenched his teeth and continued to move after thinking back to Angela and Elena. Blood mixed with sweat, and they dripped onto each and every step of stairs on the mythical altar. Finally, Faye successfully dragged this half-broken pillar onto the top of the mythical altar when he was completely covered by blood. Faye was lucky that his barbarian character had so much physical strength. Otherwise, it would be almost impossible for anyone who wasn't a Sun-class lord to pull this half-broken pillar out of the ground and move it up 1,000 meters onto the 9th level of the altar. After a moment of rest, Faye wiped the sweat and blood off of his face. He was still a little lightheaded, and he felt like he respected those workers on Earth who had to move heavy loads of items up onto the mountaintop a lot more now. After regaining some stamina, Faye endured the pain and took out a bottom of full rejuvenation potion. When the injuries on him were healed, he roared, lifted the half-broken pillar, quickly dashed into the air, and placed this half of the pillar onto the one in the middle of the altar. The stained world stone that had a mysterious red glow was perfectly embedded in between the two half-broken pillars, and Faye felt like that dent in the middle of the pillar was meant for this world stone, since the two halves perfectly aligned with the world stone in between. As soon as the two half-broken pillars were placed together, the half-broken pillar on the top lightly shivered. It felt like the two half-broken pillars were a couple that had been divided for thousands of years, and the one on the top was crying in excitement. A series of silver-white lights appeared in between the two half-broken pillars, and a red light also shone on the stained world stone. The two lights grew from weak to bright, and unexpected changes were taking place. The entire process was indescribable. Soon, the entire space inside the mountain was lit up by these two colors. Faye was shocked to find that the crack between these two half-broken pillars was slowly disappeared. It wasn't as simple as stacking the two half-broken pillars together, but the pillar was indeed healing itself like a muscle. Soon, the two half-broken pillars became one. Faye suddenly thought of something else and was terrified. If the two half-broken pillars combined into one, then how could he take out the world stone that was inside of it? Faye knew he didn't have the strength to break this pillar again and take out the World Stone. Then, he realized that it seemed like the pillar was absorbing the energy from the World Stone. Also, Faye's blood that was all over the pillar was slowly being sucked into the magic engraving on it as well. The scene was bizarre. Just as the king wanted to try to take out the World Stone, before this pillar completely recovers, a huge suction force suddenly came from the stone throne that was flowing in midair, like a small iron nail in front of a powerful electromagnet. He was sucked onto the throne and couldn't move at all. Then, the most shocking change occurred. Boom! Boom! This entire small world suddenly started to shake violently, and it felt like the entire space was about to collapse. Some mountains instantly collapsed, some rivers immediately disappeared as the water fell into the cracked land. Some forests were instantly lit on fire, some ragged structures were all destroyed, and the hurdles packs of wild animals screamed and tried to escape. As the volcanoes erupted, it looked like doomsday. In the southern area of the small world, a huge bald man who was more than 3 meters tall stood on a mountain that was more than 1,000 meters tall and shouted, "This earthquake? Could it be? The legendary Sky Castle is found? Impossible. Sky Castle moves around and travels in irregular patterns." It was heard that only the Continental Marshal Saint Maradona was fortunately enough to enter the legendary city once when he was young. After that, no one is able to find it anymore. How could it just appear now? This man was shocked and mad, and 2 dashes of light shot out of his eyes and flew towards the central area in the small world. After he finished speaking, he instantly dashed towards the source of the phenomenon. A black and thin ghost guard was following him tightly. This old man looked exactly the same as the person who got killed by Faye on the elemental altar. In fact, all of the ghost guards, who were the royal guards of Eindhoven, cultivated the same evil technique. When they got to a higher realm, their fingernails would grow out and be as hard as combat weapons. Also, they would look as bad as ghosts, and their characters would change a lot. They would all become vicious and murderous. This ghost guard was one of the best, and that was why he got the chance to follow Emperor Kromkamp of Eindhoven into the mythical palace. He had been serving Kromkamp for more than 30 years, and he knew this infamous tyrant well, and he had never seen him this anxious. At the moment, Kromkamp was filled with jealousy, and he also looked a little scared and flustered. Why is His Majesty this anxious? What is happening? This ghost guard was confused, but the sudden shaking of this small world brought him an ominous feeling. The two of them continued to dash towards the central area. In the northern area of the small world, the blue-haired mid-aged man who was walking in the desert calmly paused, and a concerned expression appeared on his face. He took 1 step forward, and he instantly appeared 1,000 meters away. The 2 loyal yet silent guards had to sprint after him, and they were barely able to catch up. The 3 of them also quickly approached the central area. The same thing was happening with other masters who were in the level 36 region. The mysterious white-robed mage who had green pupils, undead mage Hazelbank, Crown Prince Girano of the St. Germain Empire who had the semi-god tier combat weapon, Black Crystal Wand, the mysterious royal master of the Jax Empire who had the semi-god tier combat weapon Sand of Earthly Anger, and the weak people of the Holy Church who no one dared to attack all sensed the mysterious change occurring in the small world and identified its source. They all started to dash towards the central area from where they were. From what they know so far, they all believed that the mysterious and godly wonderland Sky Castle was about to appear. Sky Castle only appeared once more than 400 years ago. However, its brief appearance created the number 1 master on the continent, Diego Maradona. Ever since then, the mysterious Sky Castle wasn't spotted again. There had been many talented and lucky masters who had came to this level 36 region, but none of them saw this city that was floating in the sky. Continental Marshal Saint Maradona had revealed some information about how he encountered Sky Castle, and it was very similar to what was happening today. Therefore, the masters who knew a little about it were all surprised, and they all headed towards the central area. Of course, some masters were clear on their goals of collecting precious herbs and materials and advancing their realms in this world. The 4 old masters whom Faye brought in decided to stay where they were and continue to cultivate. Faye was looking at everything that was happening in shock. He wasn't able to move as he was hard stuck on the stone throne, and the throne was emitting a silver light that protected him well. As soon as the 2 half-broken pillars were combined into one, a series of rumbling noises sounded as if it was a sleeping giant that just woke up. All of the magic engravings and arrays on the mythical altar were activated, and they lit up like the blood vessels in a human body. Faye's blood that dripped onto the stone pillar now merged in with the magic energy, and thick beams of silver light appeared. There were 9 thick beams of light on each level of the altar. As soon as these lights appeared, the mythical altar started to rotate. It was a majestic scene as each level on the altar was rotating in the opposite direction as the one below it, and their speeds were different too. Some were turning clockwise, some were turning counterclockwise, some were fast, and some were slow. As if they were 9 unstoppable wheels of fate, it seemed like they were combining tens of millions of possibilities and trying to calculate the past, the present, and the future.